Well, we are in our series, Ordinary People, Extraordinary God. We're working through 1 Samuel. And before we jump into chapter 22 this morning, I just want to ask you this question. Is there any place on your bucket list that you want to travel to? Is there any place you would like to see, any place you would like to go? While you're here on earth, I mean, maybe it's a place across the world? Maybe it's someplace right here in the U.S. Maybe for some of you, I don't know, it's Iowa. I don't know. I would encourage you to dream bigger, but who knows? There was a place, I got to go to this conference. This was many years ago now. It was right here in the U.S., but it was a place, it just happened that I'd always wanted to go. It was out in Southern California, Orange County area. And the conference for our church denomination, Converge, it was being held there. And so it was like, man, it was the opportunity of a lifetime to get to go and see this place I'd always wanted to see. However, this is one thing you should know about me. I really don't like flying. I don't like getting on airplane. I just don't like the travel process. I don't like the packing. I don't like dealing with airports. You know, you show up, you have to get your ticket. There's always that person there checking you in, getting your ticket. And what are they doing? You ever been through this process? Are they just writing mumbo jumbo? Like, what are they doing? I don't know. You have to go through this. You gotta get your ticket. Then you gotta go and you gotta stand in line. You gotta go through the whole security thing. You ever had your bag checked and had to open it up and take everything out? Man, it's quite the process. And then there's the flying itself. And I've told you guys, I don't like heights. Kind of makes flying a problem. And as we, saw this past week, there is risk involved. Now, I know, there's literally tens of thousands of planes that take off and land safely every day. By the way, we never give God glory for those safe landings, do we? But that's the reality. But regardless, we still know there is risk. And people say, you're scared of heights? You're scared of going on a plane? Yeah, because I have a brain, okay? This is literally not natural. You're flying at 10,000 feet. It's just not something I love. And then you got to get off of the plane. And if you ever want a case study in the depravity of man, just go through that. Watch people trying to cut in line to get off of a plane just to stand there and wait. Do not love the process, but I did it. And I got to go and see this part of Orange County, California, that I always wanted to see, and oceans, and the ocean, the mountains. It was absolutely beautiful. But I bring this up because, oftentimes if we want to get to places we want to go, if we want to get to see what's on the other side of the world, on the other side of the country, just to see what's on the other side, listen, you got to go through a process. And that's just life, and that's the Christian life, that's the Christian journey. If we're going to experience what God has for us on the other side of whatever he's promised you, you're going to have to go through a process. And it can be challenging. It often is. Okay. We're going to see this morning that David, yes, he's been told he's going to be the next king. You have to think at this point, he's wondering if that's true. He's going to have to go through a process and go on his own sort of journey before that becomes a reality. So we're going to be picking it up in 1 Samuel 22, starting in verse 1 this morning. We read this: David left Gath, and he escaped to the cave of Adullam. And remember, who's he running from? He's running from Saul. If you read the rest of chapter 22, which I encourage you to do, you're going to see that Saul isn't playing around. We said a few weeks ago, Saul is really ultimately going to war with God. And you're going to see that especially in chapter 22 because he's going to have all of the priests that helped out David and his men last week, we talked about, put to death. Okay. Saul's not playing around, so if he's willing to do that, kill God's priest, how much more is he ready to kill David and all who are with him? So David, he's escaped to the cave of Adullam. It says when his brothers and father's household heard about it, they went down to him there. In fact, all those who were in distress or in debt or discontented, they gathered around him, and he became their commander. About 400 men were with him. And you notice that it's all those who were distressed or in debt or discontented, right? They are now flocking to be with David. Why? Because they believe God's got something for them. They believe there's something for them on the other side. And they believe David is the one that's going to help them get there. And it kind of made me think about the church, a little bit this week reading that. Isn't that the church? Isn't that just those of us who are following Christ? Isn't that who most of us? The discontented in some way? Maybe a debt of some kind? Maybe just sin debt? I don't know. Feeling that? Distress? Isn't that who usually ends up following this Jesus, because we believe that through Christ there's an answer there and that God has something for us on the other side? Well, that's what's happening here. And if you notice where it's taking place at the cave of Adullam. This was in the middle of nowhere. It wasn't too far from Bethlehem, right, where David's from. So he probably knew about this cave. One lexicon says that the word Adullam actually means hiding place. So this is where David is trying to find refuge, okay, as Saul is out to get him. Now, verse 3 says, from there David went to Mizpah in Moab, and he said to the king of Moab, would you let my father and mother come and stay with you until I learn what God will do for me? So he left them with the king of Moab, and they stayed with him as long as David was in the stronghold. So first things first, David apparently needed some distance between his parents, I guess. I don't know. He is a young teenager. Maybe his mom kept telling him to clean the cave. I don't know. But why do you think he goes to Moab? There is a kind of a Bible trivia thing going on here. Well, if you know the story, this is where his great-grandmother is from. Who is that? Ruth. Ruth is David's great-grandmother. She was from Moab, so probably had some family connections there. Would make sense why David could hide his parents away. And the ultimate reason he's doing this is because oftentimes when your family, if you were a threat to the king, they don't just kill you, right? They're going to try to wipe out your entire lineage. So he's trying to hide his parents. And he said, would you let my father and mother come and stay with you until I learn what God will do for me? Until I find out what God has for me on the other side. He doesn't know. He's living in this place of ambiguity. And isn't that the Christian life? I think sometimes we think we're doing something wrong because we don't know where God's taking us. I think sometimes we think we're doing something wrong because we don't know exactly what our calling is. Friends, that's just the Christian life. I can't tell you why, but God tends to leave us in this place of ambiguity, and we have to just accept it. Maybe that's where some of us are this morning. Because I don't know. I don't know what God is doing. I sense deep down, there's something. I sense he has something for my future. I don't know what it is, and I don't know how I'm going to get there. And you're living day to day in this place of ambiguity. Now, sometimes God shows up, and he will give you some direction of what you need to do. And when he does that, it's always crystal clear, right? And it always makes total sense. Not usually. Verse 5. But the prophet Gad said to David, do not stay in the stronghold. Go into the land of Judah. So David left and he went to the forest of Hereth. You notice what they're calling the cave here. They're calling it a stronghold. This Hebrew word, by the way, can mean refuge. It can actually even mean castle. This cave is David's makeshift castle where he has protection, where he has safety. He can't be surrounded by Saul's army. They're going to have to come through a narrow opening so they can defend themselves. I mean, there's protection at this cave. And what does God say to do? Leave it behind. And he sends David to Judah. And this is so God. It just doesn't make sense. This is when God leads your life, you can expect for things not to make sense. Now, we need to understand, if you read on in 1 Samuel, things are going to happen in Judah, one thing's going to lead to another, and this is ultimately what's going to lead to David becoming the king of Israel. And so you can argue, had he not obeyed the Lord, then that never happens. But oftentimes, listen, if we're going to experience what God has for us on the other side, friends, you are going to have to step out of your comfort zone. And that's just the Christian life. It's one in where we have to step, oftentimes out of our comfort zone to follow Jesus. In fact, Jesus put it this way in Matthew 10. He said, whoever finds their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. And one way you can think about that is what Jesus is saying there is whoever finds their life, whoever finds their comfort and just hunkers down, finds their worldly comforts and just lives in that place is oftentimes going to get inoculated to true life. They're going to try to get life from this world. They're not going to actually get it, but they're going to get just enough that they never actually discover true life. Meanwhile, the person who gives up their comforts and steps into the uncomfortable, following Christ, this is the person who will actually find out what's on the other side and find the true life that God promises us. In other words, friends, what I'm saying is you can have comfort or you can have faith, but you can't have both. It's just part of following God. And here's what I know. Listen, we are all experiencing, I believe this, some level of uncomfort. And you say, how do you know that, Pastor? I know that because you're here this morning. Or you're watching online. Let's be honest, there's other things you could have been doing with your time today. And yet you either tuned in or you got out of the house and you came here. Why? Because you believe God has something for you. You're stepping into the uncomfortable. You're there on some level, to some degree. trying to follow this Jesus to the best of your abilities. That's why you're here. You know, they say that the greatest fear that people have, do you know what it is? It's not death. It's public speaking. Death is number 2. People would rather die than have to get up and over. And listen, that's me. I don't love public, believe it or not, I don't love public speaking. But what I do know is when God called me, he put this burning thing in my heart. It's like, I want people to know how real God is. I want them to know what the gospel actually is and not what religion has told them it is. And God said, okay, well, if you're gonna do that, you're gonna have to step into something that's very uncomfortable. And it's gotten better, but this is, you're scary sometimes. I love you. It's gotten easier, but man, it is also uncomfortable at times. And you say, why does God do that? Why does God call us to do things that we're uncomfortable with? Why does God call us to do things that doesn't, I even wonder, why did you call me to do? Because there seems to be people who love to get up in front of other people. And the only thing I can come up with is God loves to work through ordinary people. Amen? So that when he does something, we don't get the glory, he does. But make no mistake about it, it's oftentimes going to mean stepping into the uncomfortable. And that's just the Christian life in general. It's following Jesus. It's often going to mean doing things that doesn't make sense. And we have to learn how to be comfortable being uncomfortable. Does that make sense? That's the Christian life. It's this journey of learning how to be comfortable in the uncomfortable. So how do we do that? And that's, with the rest of our time, I just want to give you a few things that can maybe help you if you're there, feeling that this morning, maybe a few things just to think about that can maybe help you out a little bit. These are some things that have helped me on my journey, especially when my uncomfort levels are high. The first thing I would suggest to you is look to your Ebenezer. Look to your Ebenezer. If you don't know what an Ebenezer was, this is something, it really just means like rock of remembrance. It was a monument that Israel would set up usually after a victory in battle or after a covenant was made. But it was a monument that was set up so when Israelites, would walk by that monument and see it, they would remember what the Lord had done. And it would strengthen their heart and encourage their faith. And friends, we all need Ebenezers. Things to look back in our life where we saw God do something. Because you're going to have moments where you're going to wonder, is God here? Is he doing anything? You're going to need your Ebenezer. So you remember, he's a powerful God. He did it then, and he can do it. He can do it again. I can tell you here, even in my own personal life, whenever there's a need, a financial thing comes up, something like that, and I need God's provision, you know what I'm Edinburgh Church is an Ebenezer for me. Because I just see how God has taken care of this church year after year after year, working through you and your generosity. And somehow we always get to the end of the year and we're going, I don't know how we're going to make it. I don't know how we're going to keep doing ministry at this level. And then God shows up past December, highest giving month ever. And I'm just going, wow, there's my Ebenezer. And when I have my moments where I don't know how God's going to provide for me, my family, this certain situation, car situation, whatever it might be, you've taken care of us time and time again. You will provide. You'll take care of me in my future. And by the way, if you wanted to set up recurring giving, that would help me not to have to look at my Ebenezer as much. But it is quite miraculous to see how God has just worked through this ministry. It just blows my mind, church. I don't have words. I don't have words. It truly is supernatural. It doesn't make sense on paper. And yet it happens. And here we are. Psalm 77 says this, I will remember the deeds of the Lord. Yes, I will remember your miracles of long ago. I will consider all your works and meditate on all your mighty deeds. When was the last time you just sat down, took out a piece of paper, or got on your computer, or did something on your phone where you wrote out all of those times that you can think of when God just showed up for you and did something beyond what you thought possible? Okay? It's happened. It's happened. But you need to put some thought into that, and that's going to become your Ebenezer. And if you want to anywhere else to look, if you need somewhere to look, just look how he's taking care of this church. Second thing I would suggest to you, put it all in the Lord's hands. Put your troubles, put your worries, put whatever that is, you got to turn it over to him. Friends, you don't know this about your past. I used to struggle with so much anxiety. I was the guy on the floor having panic attacks. When I first became a believer, I had at least one panic attack a week, and they were brutal. And still today, I think I have some physiological reasons for that, and so I take some certain kinds of supplements. I have to be careful with what I eat and stuff like that to manage that. But I'm telling you, the greatest medicine of all was truly learning and trusting in the sovereignty of God. When I say sovereignty of God, what I mean is God is in control of everything. Everything. You say, well, bad things happen. Yeah, well, God allows it. And I'm sorry, I know we don't always love that. But I would argue it's 10 times worse to say God didn't see that coming. And that was outside of his hands. No, I see what the Bible actually teaches us. The Bible teaches us, yes, we live in a sinful world. God lets us taste the fall. But when the devil shows up and tries to use that against God, what do? You show up with Romans 8:28. For I know that God's going to work together all things, devil, for my good. Or you're going to say what Joseph said. You intended it for evil, but what? God intended it for good. This is how you fight back. The Bible teaches us that God's in control. Have you read the book of Job? How are you going to explain that with that American theology? It's not biblical. In fact, let me show you one. Proverbs 16:33. We may throw the dice, but Yahweh determines how they fall. God determines whether you win at Yahtzee. Whether you're rolling snake eyes in Monopoly. You think he's not in control? He's in control. I had to learn this. Everything. My life, good, the bad, what comes with it, it's in your hands, God. I'm trusting you. I've had to learn how to take my life and say, Lord, it's you. So I give it to you because, yes, this is a fallen, sinful world. And you tell me that if I will surrender it, my life over to you, you will work it out for my good. So I'm going to put my life in your hands because you are the most powerful being there is. And that's where I find my peace. I have to just turn it over. I bet some of us, we have some worries today. I bet we have some anxieties today. I bet we got some fears today, some health concerns today, financial woes today, whatever that is in this place of ambiguity where you're wondering, where is God? While you're in the process of wondering, you've got to turn it over to him and put it in his hands so that you can have peace and find your comfort in the midst of the uncomfortable. And so something we do from time to time here at Edinburgh, it's kind of a discipline we practice. I've taught you this many times, where you just imagine whatever that is, and you surrender it over to the Lord. You just say, God, it's in my hands, but whoop, I'm letting it go. Whoop, I'm turning it over to you. It's yours now. It's your problem, and your glory's on the line. You see how that works? Your glory, God, is on the line for how my life turns out. That's living in the new covenant, y'all. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna let's put our hands out. Let's practice that. Whatever that worry is, whatever that fear is, that problem, that challenge. I'm gonna count to 3, and we're gonna release it. 1, 2, 3. Whoop. You can even make the sound effect if you want. Friends, he's in control. Turn it over to him. Did you ever think maybe that's what he's waiting for? Third thing I would encourage you to do is remember that you're not alone. I love what Jesus says. This is after the resurrection, but just before he's going to ascend and go to heaven, and he's going to be distant from his disciples physically. And he knows that's going to be hard on the disciples, but he tells them this. Matthew 28, he says, then Jesus came to them and he said, all authority, there we go, in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them, something we're called to do, in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. He says everything hangs on loving God, loving people. And then he says this, and surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. I don't know about you. That speaks to my soul. Jesus telling, he's with us by his Spirit. He's with us to the very end of the age. Friends, you're not alone, okay? But what happens in our Christian walk is we just get caught up in the world, we get caught up in our problems, we get caught up in our worries, and we grow distant from God. And my encouragement to you is, no, we gotta draw closer. We gotta stay close so that he can comfort our hearts. We might be living in the uncomfortable. It doesn't mean you don't have a comforter to help you navigate the ambiguity of this world. And so my challenge to us is to use this time we're here at church, right, to get right with God. Let's just draw close this morning. In fact, we're going to do that. One of the best ways we can is by taking communion this morning. That's what communion is. It's fellowshipping with him. So we're going to take this. If you didn't grab a cup, just raise your hand. We have people in the back. They'll bring you the communion cup. And while they're passing that out, I just want to tell you a quick story. Story about a guy who falls off of a cliff, okay? He falls off a cliff, but he catches a branch. And I mean, he's looking below the ground, it's hundreds and hundreds of feet below him. And so he's hanging on for his life, hanging on to this branch. And he shouts, "Help me. Is there anybody up there? Help me." And God peeks his head over the top of this cliff and says, "I'm here." And he says, "God, help me. Can you lower a branch, throw a rope, something? Help me." And what do you think God tells him to do? Some of you've heard this, right? God says, "Let go." let go. And what does the man say? Is there anybody else up there, right? Because let's be honest, friends, letting go is hard for us. See, some of you think the way you get right with God is climbing that cliff on your own. That's what you think. That's what religion taught you. The gospel is letting go and letting Jesus be the net that catches you. And that's hard to do in our flesh. Anybody else? Every day, we're trying to climb that cliff and get right. God's saying, I'm asking you to do the hardest thing, the most uncomfortable thing you can do. If you want to experience what's on the other side, being with me in my glory, is letting go and trusting in the goodness of Jesus Christ. That's the gospel. His righteousness, his sacrifice on the cross, his resurrection, not yours. And so some of us, we need to let go. We're trying to do it on our own. And God's waiting for you to let go and trust what this is all about. The way we draw closest to God is when we put our full dependence on the goodness of Jesus Christ and the provision that God has made for us out of his love for us. And so communion is a time to let this be our Ebenezer. Jesus has already won the victory, friends. We just have to receive it. And that makes God smile when you do that. So let's draw close. Let's peel this top layer. This represents his body broken for us. And Jesus said, I'm your Ebenezer. Do this in remembrance of me. Remember what I've done for you. Let's eat, church. Let's peel that second layer. This is the blood of Christ. We're told brings the forgiveness of sin. And this is a time, if there is sin in our life and we need to confess anything or turn anything over to God, listen, he knows. He sees it. We don't need to be walking in shame. You just need to get right. That's what we're here for. And so, God, we receive what Christ has done for us and the sacrifice he made. Purify us, wash us, cleanse us. We want to be right with you. Let's drink. Well, Lord, I know there's many here today who are wondering what you have for us. And I'm just going to pray that we will experience you in such a powerful way that we would be able to have peace, a peace that surpasses all understanding. We'd be able to have even joy wherever you have us today. So, Lord, let your heavenly blessings flow into our heart as we get ready for our week and step back into the uncomfortable. Just pray that we will know you are with us. And we look forward to what you have for us on the other side. And we pray this in your name, Jesus. All God's people said.